and welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here shortly. Looks like we've got quite a few people on. Thank you for joining us. Okay. All right. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. We're going to go ahead and just get started in a few minutes. This is a great turnout for a lunchtime webinar. I'm Linda Higgins with Placer County Water Agency, and let's see here. If what we're going to do, if you have any questions, feel free to put that in the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on PCWA's website, hopefully in the next day or two. And if you have any technical difficulties during this, go ahead and you can reach out to Kathy, and her number is on the screen there. So we'll try to, so let me go over the format of this webinar. What we're gonna, okay, there it goes. The videos and the webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our website under customer services and Firewise, Waterwise landscaping. So the way we're gonna do this today is we have both videos that are pre-recorded, and then we're gonna have some live Q&A after each video, and then we've saved some time for questions at the end. So feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat. The Q&A, I've already seen a few in there, and we'll try to answer those. And the reason why we're doing it this way is we really wanted to, we're very fortunate to have Rob Zaucha, the battalion chief with the Auburn Fire Department, with us today. And we weren't sure because of fire season if we could have him today. So that's why we're doing the webinar with this format. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rob.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rob Zaucha. I'm a battalion chief here at the Auburn Fire Department, and I'm really happy to be here. This is a great topic, and this is a great turnout. We have several hundred registrants, so I'm really happy and excited to discuss this topic. It is a very important subject. We in the fire service have seen time and time again on major fires the difference that defensible space and home hardening can make. And oftentimes it comes down to whether a home survives or not. So this is really a great topic, and I'm really glad everyone's here to discuss it and learn more about it. As you know, we are in the middle of another tough fire season. We have the Dixie Fire to our north with over 750,000 acres burned. We have the Caldor Fire to our south with over 150,000 acres burned, and we've had the River Fire here right in our backyard. So fire affects us all, and the more we can learn and protect ourselves, the safer we'll all be. So I'm really glad and excited to discuss this topic with everyone. Back to you, Linda.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, so we have 3 awesome videos today, and I will go ahead and introduce each one, and then again we can have questions at the end. So we have an overview of Firewise, Waterwise landscaping. We also have landscape and irrigation design, and then we have Waterwise plants. So I'm going to go ahead and let's get started on the first Firewise, Waterwise video with Kevin Marini with the UC Master Gardeners and the Battalion Chief, Rob Zaucha.
Hi, I'm Rob Zaucha, Battalion Chief for the Auburn City Fire Department.
My name is Kevin Marini, and I work for UC Extension here in Placer County.
And today we're at our Maidu Fire Station, and we'll be discussing some Firewise, Waterwise plants and concepts. Kevin, why don't you define what Firewise, Waterwise plants are?
That's a tricky question to start off. So the idea of firescaping is to make your yard as resistant to wildfire as possible to protect your home, right? And so the idea behind Firewise landscaping is to place plants in a way and then pick plants in a way that minimize the risk of wildfire spreading quickly to your home. And so the Waterwise element is because we live in California, we also have to be concerned about water and the plant's use of water. And therefore, if we can mix Firewise landscaping with a drought-tolerant landscape, we get a win-win. And so that's the basic concept, is marrying both the Firewise element with the Waterwise element. It's not necessarily always possible, but when we can do it, it's the best.
And so there are plants that meet both those criteria for Waterwise and Firewise, not necessarily different types of plants.
It's a little tricky, but in general, there's no plant that exists that won't burn. So all plants will burn, but there's certain plants that have a growth habit, have a certain amount of water in their leaves, have less oils and resins in them, that make them, quote, Firewise. I would never tell someone to rely completely on plant selection for fire protection. It's one tool in the toolbox. And so by using Firewise plants, there's characteristics of those plants where you're choosing, and the Waterwise component comes in kind of afterwards, to be honest. You're looking at these characteristics that make it Firewise, and then if it also has that complement of being Waterwise, like I said, that's a win-win.
We see on fires plants that want to burn. They quickly ignite, and when they do ignite, they almost explode. Could you explain maybe what some of those plants are or why that is occurring?
Sure. So a lot of people associate native plants with drought tolerance, right? And we have to be very clear that there are some that are wonderful native plants for Firewise landscapes. However, the plants you're talking about are both native and extremely explosive and very flammable. Incense cedars, that's a popular tree in this area, and that's a very flammable tree. I would not have that near the house. Things like our shrubby manzanita, which is a beautiful shrub, but when that gets burning, it burns extremely hot. So not every California native plant fits the mold of a Firewise, Waterwise plant.
Great. And we get asked from the public a lot, does defensible space mean clearing out my vegetation, having no landscaping? How do we best answer that?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because a lot of people associate the 100 feet of defensible space as kind of a uniform landscape. And it's really not so much. The first 5 feet from your house out, the ember ignition zone is by far the most important. So if you're not going to put any effort anywhere else, put it in that 5 feet and make sure there's no plant material that could catch fire there. But then as you move out 30 more feet, you can start incorporating perennials and bulbs and grasses and things like that. And then above and beyond the 30 feet to the 100 feet, shrubs and trees and things like that. It's more about the spacing of plants and the maintenance of plants than a uniform landscape of a specific type of plant.
All right, great. So it does look like we have quite a few questions, and we have some pretty good questions here too. So I think I'm gonna, either Rob or Kevin, I'm gonna kick this one over to you, and we're gonna answer a question from Leona. What are the best trees to plant on property lines that are not as likely to catch fire?
Okay, well, it's a great question. As I mentioned in the little video there, I try to take the focus away from specific plants and relying just on plant selection. However, this question is very specific, and we will be talking about some specific plants later on in the videos. But just as an example, the Western redbud, our California native tree, that you see blooming in the springtime with those kind of magenta flowers, is a wonderful tree that I would recommend for that type of situation. There's many options out there. Again, you're probably, if you want to really pick a tree that is Firewise, you're going to want to try to avoid evergreens and pick something that's a deciduous tree. Evergreens tend to be conifers and needle-like leaves, and tend to have more resins in them and be more prone to catching fire or burning hot. Whereas deciduous trees are a better choice for that sort of situation. My favorite just happens to be Western redbud, so that's what I would recommend.
And we have some photos of that, a photo, I think, also
think
that
so,
we can
yeah.
show. Okay. This one, I think I'll do one more question and then we can move on. This is from D. Marsh. Is there a Firewise landscape fabric for under the gravel to suppress weeds?
That's a good question. Most landscape fabric, of course, is some sort of plastic material, right? Which I don't believe is fire resistant. I could be wrong on that. So I don't know of any specific type of weed fabric that would be completely resistant to fire. I know a lot of people will use cardboard and newspaper to suppress weeds and then put mulch on top of that. Obviously, that is not even close to anything Firewise. So I think if I had to pick between the ones that I know of, it's probably the heavier, thicker landscape fabric that is plastic based. But like I said, I'd have no idea what the fire resistance of that material is.
I think it's important to reiterate that everything will burn to some degree. So landscape fabric, it's intended to let water through, and it serves a purpose that might not suit it for flammability, but at the same time, if you cover it with your inorganic mulch, that will help. If you put gravel and rock on top of it, chances of it burning are a lot less. Now, the problem we see is over time, the mulch material moves out of the way and the fabric becomes exposed. So really, I think it's the maintenance of that fabric in helping it not burn versus the actual type of fabric itself.
Good point, Rob.
Okay, looks like, we have some really great questions, and I think what I'd like to do is sort of go through the videos, and maybe some of these questions might actually be answered, and then if they're not, then we can kind of summarize at the end with all of the panelists, because I think some of these questions might actually be well suited for both Jeff and Greg as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the next video on landscape and irrigation design with Jeff Ambrosia with Yamasaki Landscape Architecture, again being interviewed by the Battalion Chief, Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Zaucha, Battalion Chief for the Auburn City Fire Department.
And I'm Jeff Ambrosia, Yamasaki Landscape Architecture.
And today we're here at our Maidu Fire Station discussing some of the Firewise and Waterwise concepts and plants. Jeff, we get asked from the public about defensible space a lot and whether or not that means clearing all vegetation from that zone. Could you help answer the best?
Clearing vegetation within the defensible space of a house of 100 feet is not only not practical, but it's not advised. You need plant material around your house for natural habitat and just for general appearance. So it's a matter of planting it properly. Home hardening suggests that we have a 5-foot area right against the house that doesn't have any plant material at all, and that's to help to prevent it from carrying onto the house itself. The next 30 feet, it's very important to keep low-growing plant material, and if you have trees, the trees are spaced far apart and they don't overreach the house. And in that 30-foot zone, you could have a pool, or you could have a patio, or you could have lawn. It's not to say that Waterwise landscaping completely eliminates lawn. There can be a bit of lawn in a landscape. It's just a matter of keeping it in the right proportions. And then beyond the 30 feet, it's a really matter of maintaining it properly. You can have larger shrubs, larger trees, but nothing that's going to climb from the ground up to the trees, and nothing that's going to transmit the fire between the trees.
Jeff, why don't we discuss a little bit the design we have here at the fire station?
Yeah, so obviously we're going to focus on Waterwise plant material and Firewise plant material so we can create a bit of a demonstration garden for the public to see. Other important components of the landscape include creating islands of plant material. So it's important if you're planting that you've got space between areas and between plants, and you can create islands of plant material that are all using the same water, the same amount of water. It's what's called a hydrozone. And having proper spacing between these islands is important, because if one island were to catch fire, it's nice to have space between the islands and makes it for a better defensible space.
And what type of irrigation did we install here?
Well, as you recall, before we started the project, it was all lawn and it was overhead spray irrigation, which is incredibly inefficient. So removing all of the lawn and putting in drip irrigation is what's important here. And so what we've done is we've created a grid of subsurface drip irrigation that has emitters on a regular basis. And it's a much more efficient way of irrigating all the plant material. You don't get the overspray and you don't get any evaporation.
And how should we best maintain our plants?
Well, maintenance is crucial. It's important to make sure that you maintain the irrigation system, to make sure that it's running at all times. And it's also important to maintain around the plant material. Keeping dead wood out of plants is very important. Keeping the area around the base of the plant clear is important. And making sure that you don't get too many large clusters of plants that are encroaching on each other. Proper spacing is important.
And how about the irrigation? What's the best way to maintain?
Well, irrigation is always important on every project, even if you're planting native landscapes. A misconception is that native plant material doesn't need irrigation, and that's not true in our area. So Waterwise irrigation is important. We use drip irrigation almost primarily for projects in this area and throughout the state for that matter.
So when we discuss mulch and that loss rate, what's the best mulch or material for us to use?
Well, yeah, bark mulch is really important, and what it does is it helps to keep the moisture content high in the soil, and it also keeps weeds down. So it's kind of a dual force there. Choosing the right mulch is also important. A lot of people like the looks of the shredded redwood, otherwise known as gorilla hair. It's by far the most flammable of all of the bark mulches. So something that has a fairly large scale to it, nothing that's a lot of shreds is important when choosing the mulch.
And how about its placement around the house?
So there's a hardening zone around the house of about 5 feet that's really important to keep mulch away from. And typically we like to recommend some gravel or some decorative gravel mulch, something along those lines. But from there out, it's important to get about a 3-inch layer of bark mulch.
And what advice do you have for homeowners that might be designing their landscape?
Well, take advantage of your local nurseries. They've got great plant material that works in your region. Consult with a designer of some sort. And there's a lot of things that you can learn online. So really having the proper design up front is the best way to make sure you're going to have a successful landscape.
All right, so we did get it sounds like, or it looks like we answered a couple questions from Carol. Looks like we may have answered your question for those that asked questions about mulch and bark. But I will ask one that I think Jeff or Rob or even Kevin could probably answer. So it sounds like, is it safe to place patio bark around your house? Is one of our questions.
Yeah, as we discussed, I mean, it's best to keep that bark mulch at least 5 feet away from the house. That's your kind of your ember ignition zone, and so keeping it away is a good idea. Also, the choice of bark mulch is important. We typically specify what's called a walk-on mulch, which has larger pieces to it. As I mentioned in the video, the shredded redwood, sometimes shredded cedar, has real fine materials. I mean, you know, as Boy Scouts, that's how you learn how to start fires, is find the finest material you can and put a spark to it and it lights. So we want the opposite here. We want bark material that is larger. So yeah, bark mulch is really important for a landscape.
And it's important to remember too, even when you're using mulches that might not necessarily burn, such as gravel or rock or DG, there's still going to be a collection of leaves and leaf litter that occur over time. And that collection in the corners and the nooks and the crannies is exactly where the embers are going to land from a fire. So placing the inorganic mulch is the first step, and then maintaining your landscape in the area directly around your house is the follow-up that has to take place as well.
Okay, and then we've got one here from Mr. Snyder. The hedge next to walls seems to be a fire hazard. Is it?
So probably referring to the hedge that's at the fire station. And first of all, that's a CMU block wall. So in that case, it's not a fire hazard. That was one of the plant materials that we inherited from the previous installation, and decided that because it wasn't a fire hazard, based on its proximity to the building, it was probably worth keeping. But you make a good point. You don't want plant material that close to a house typically. And so keeping it away is important. Now, with that said, a hedge like that at the edge of your property is important oftentimes. And what happens is that hedge can create as kind of a backstop. So if you have fire that's say coming up a slope towards your house, or you have embers that are blowing towards your house, oftentimes a solid hedge like that can be beneficial. It could be a hedge, it could be a fence, it could be a wall. Those are all elements that are a good idea to have at the edge of your property to help prevent those embers from rolling along the ground and coming into your property.
And the maintenance of the plants too. So keeping that dead material clear, trimming out the leaves and the branches that are the undergrowth that may not have any real purpose anymore. That's the material that wants to readily burn. And when it drops its leaves, keeping the area free and clear underneath. It's the small details and the maintenance that can make a big difference in your property.
Okay, and then we have a question here that I think collectively we can answer. There's one from Mr. Smithhart that says, do you have a fire safe plant list for Placer County? And some of the plants that were used at the fire station makeover, those are on our website. There is no sort of official fire safe plant list for Placer County. And I don't know if Rob or Jeff, if you guys kind of want to chime in, or even Kevin on this one.
Yeah, I haven't really seen a list right specific to Placer County, but there's a great website called firesafemarin.org. That is fabulous. It has, directions for planting and for irrigating and for maintenance and things along those lines. And oddly, their website is under construction right now, and so they've identified that their plant list will come in September. But I have seen them in the past, and they're very helpful to identify plants that are not only Firewise, but also plants to avoid from a combustibility standpoint. So again, firesafemarin.org is the website. And but then also there's additional resources out there. If you type in firescaping or Firewise landscaping, there's a number of websites on the web that will kind of give you some good direction in terms of Waterwise and Firewise plant material.
And we're going to touch on these plants more in the next segment as well, but there's a lot of local resources around here too, such as designers like yourself, Jeff, and local nurseries too.
Okay, so we're gonna do one more type of question. We're getting a lot of questions related to watering. So I'm gonna kind of see if we can't combine all three questions. So which is better, deep watering for an hour or watering lightly several times a week? And I can answer that one, but I'm gonna kind of see if I can't clump some of these together. Let's see. I have a new front yard landscape from Kate, scheduled to go in October. Given the water situation, should I wait? And let's see, from CJ, besides drip irrigation and mulching, can you suggest a Firewise solution for gardens? So most of these, and then also what's the best time of day to water your lawn via a sprinkler system without running the risk to introduce lawn disease such as fungus, etc. So I'll let you guys answer, and then I can chime in too based on the water agency's perspective.
Well, the lawn is you prefer to water in early morning time. That way you get the least amount of evaporation. Typically there's less wind in the water, in the mornings. So watering in the morning is a good idea. And then it allows that lawn to dry out throughout the day. You mentioned fungus. Sometimes if you water too late in the evening or in the afternoon, you'll trap a lot of moisture in the lawn area, and it's not necessarily beneficial to the lawn. In terms of waiting to install, if you're installing in October, I think that's an ideal time to plant. It allows the plant material to get a bit established before the winter hits. In terms of being concerned about water and whether you should wait, I mean, water is going to be a concern of ours in the state of California for the rest of our lives. So there's not going to be any better time to install something based on water consumption. Hopefully your plant palette is low water use and you're taking advantage of drip irrigation to the greatest extent possible, because that's going to be the most efficient.
And I will say that fall, if is a good time to plant, and also if you are removing your turf, which is very water hungry, water thirsty, PCWA does have a rebate program right now that you can take advantage of, taking out your turf and then getting up to $1,000 for your to take out your turf for plants, and up to $500 for irrigation as well. So now is a great time.
I think you also asked the question, Linda, about deep watering versus frequent watering.
Yes.
And deep watering is always going to be a good idea. It forces that root zone to go deeper, which will then allow it to maintain better health, and it won't require water as often if you can get that root zone to travel deep beneath the plants.
All right. Okay. So let's thank you guys. These are some really great questions, and I'm glad to see there's so many. But let's move on to the next video, which is on Waterwise plants with Greg Gayton with Green Acres Nursery and Supply, interviewed by me.
Hi, I'm Linda Higgins with Placer County Water Agency.
And I'm Greg Gayton with Green Acres Nursery and Supply.
And today we're going to talk about Firewise, Waterwise landscaping. So this morning we were at the fire station, and we saw a lot of, I'm assuming, these plants here. And so this one I saw this is a butterfly bush at the fire station, but it was a lot bigger. So is this is a little guy?
This is a butterfly bush, the Buddleia. This is a dwarf variety, and throughout the years, more cultivars have been introduced. This is a dwarf one that doesn't need to be cut back as often, and there's a multitude of colors that it comes in, so it's really beautiful. Loves the full sun, and very, very water wise. Once it's established, give it a year or two to establish itself. After a good drip watering system is installed, and it'll be really great throughout the years.
And then, and I noticed it comes in different colors too. So, and I think this is a salvia, and this is also something that we saw at the fire station too.
Okay, this is salvia, yeah. It takes full sun, extremely water wise. Once it's established, it doesn't need as much water in the summertime. So give it a couple years, and it attracts pollinators like hummingbirds and bees. It looks beautiful throughout the summertime, and it's very fire-wise. It doesn't have any resins in it, so it's not going to combust if we get a fire as much. All plants can burn, but this one's not going to go up in flames really quick. So we really consider this Firewise.
Okay.
And it comes in a multitude of colors as well.
Yeah, I saw that. The red right here, the purple.
Pinks.
And then, so this is now I already forgot. So this also was at the fire station, but it was in yellow. And this was a Texas yucca.
Yeah.
And this is also water efficient.
Very water efficient. Full sun. You can put it in decomposed granite next to a rock, a reflection. It will tolerate that. Once it's established again, and that's what's great about these plants, they're going to not need as much summer water. The leaves are such that they're not going to catch fire as much. If they do, it's going to burn them, but it's not going to explode out like a plant that loses a lot of leaves or has a lot of brown or has a lot of resin in it.
Okay. And then you mentioned something earlier about the fact that a lot of these water efficient plants or Firewise plants are good for our environment. You said that you used the word biology. What would you say about the biology of these type of plants?
Okay, so that's a great question. So not only are they water wise and fire wise, but they introduce pollinators and beneficial insects into your yard. So you get pollinators like hummingbirds and bees and butterflies, and beneficials like ladybugs and that take care of the aphids. So
Right.
besides having a Firewise, Waterwise landscape, you can actually have something that helps the environment, brings nature into your yard, sequesters carbon, cools down your yard, and looks fantastic.
So they would attract ladybugs, which eat aphids, so you don't
Yeah.
have to spray with pesticides,
Oh, yeah.
right? Which
Oh,
is
yeah.
great for the water,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay, now what about the Nandina? See, I know a few water efficient plants working at a water agency.
Okay.
So this is, I see this also like kind of just all over the place, kind of in the back, and
Sure.
then there's usually ground cover in the
Yes.
front. And this is water efficient as well.
Very water efficient, and it gives really fall beauty. With it starts to the foliage turns red. This is a sterile variety. It doesn't produce the berry. It's low growing. Loves the full sun. Will tolerate some shade. It's structured so that it doesn't have any resin, so it's very Firewise. And again, too much water once these are established will kill them. So it's very, very water wise.
You know, during the last drought, we noticed that a lot of people, not only did they lose their turf, but we also lost a lot of trees. And so we really want to stress that people, if we have to get into a situation where you have to stress your landscape and your grass, we certainly want to save the trees. So do you have some favorite trees that you'd like to recommend?
Oh, most definitely. Like the California redbud, which is a native. It has beautiful magenta-like flowers. It's very, very Firewise and very water-wise too. Some of the deciduous oak trees, they're going to give you shade. They're going to give a habitat for nature in your yard, and they're going to help cool your house down, and they are going to be very water-wise too.
Okay, so I've got one more question. So this right here, is this Coreopsis
Yes.
right here? Was this at the fire station too? Because this is so beautiful.
This was not. Everything else was. I put this in here because it's yellow, so it attracts bees. Bees like yellows, purples, and whites. But it brings in the pollinators. It's very drought tolerant once it's established. Great in like little island plantings in your yard where you have to keep distance. And it's Firewise, so it's gonna be really pretty. You can have a really beautiful landscape and do your part in saving water and being Firewise.
So the other thing that PCWA promotes is high efficiency irrigation. And so we have a rebate for customers to take out their old irrigation or sprinkler heads and put in water efficient plants or drip. So, and a lot of people want to know, how do I water this? So what would you suggest for, many of these plants, like how would you water these?
Well, you would start out with a drip watering system. Make sure that you run the drip long enough so you can saturate the real root zone. Then let it go on the dry side and then water again. So you have to check your system, but once they're established, you start pulling the emitters away from the trunk so that the whole root system spreads. Once the root system is established, the plant is very established and needs less water.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, well, Greg, thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure.
Awesome. So I'm going to do a quick time check here. Looks like we have about 15 minutes left. Thanks, Greg. I know I mentioned trees on the video, and so maybe we could show the California redbud while I'm chatting here. But so with the remaining time, we do have a few more questions, and I think I know we want to thank some folks, and then we want to be sure to answer some of the questions that we have here. So let's can we get everybody, I guess all of the panelists on so we can answer some of these questions. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, this is from Paul. Because plants native to this area are encouraged at local nurseries. Is there a way for more people to have the ability to plant natives? Let's,
I can kind of answer that in the
Okay.
sense that we have seen as demand has increased for California natives, we have more and more supply. And so the more customers that go to nurseries and say, we want these California native plants, the more we will have the supply that will come along with it. There was a time when the demand just was so much greater than the supply out there. A lot of propagation of native plants isn't as necessarily as easy as propagating some of our more popular non-native plants that you'd see at the nursery. But I know UC Davis has an Arboretum All-Star program and is doing wonderful things with propagating California natives down at the UC Davis Arboretum. I know Green Acres Nursery is doing a great job at stocking more and more over time, but really fueling the demand. So it's up to you guys out there, you know, going to the nurseries and asking for those California natives to be available.
And
Okay.
if I might pipe in, California natives are fantastic, and a lot of them, like the California fuchsia, look great year-round. But remember that a lot of California natives go to sleep. And so realize and start educating yourself. There's a lot of great sources out there, like the California Native Plant Society, and asking, you know, at the nursery. So realize that some of them go to sleep and they don't look as pretty sometimes out during the season. So, you know, planting them, you know, that just adds so much flair to your yard. But remember that they don't look as tidy year round.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions about deer, very popular around here. So one of the questions was, are the plants that are planted at the fire station, are they generally deer resistant? And then somebody else also asked about the where is the plant list for the fire station, and it is on PCWA's website under smart water use at the Maidu Fire Station makeover. So Kevin or Jeff or Greg, I guess anybody can answer the question about the deer resistant.
Generally, yes, most of the plant material at the fire station is deer resistant. I say resistant because, like fires, every plant will burn ultimately, and depending on the level of drought, deer, of course, as we know, they get hungry and they will eat things sometimes that they have never eaten before. But for the most part, yes, the plant material at the fire station is deer tolerant.
Okay, and then I've got another question. We've got lots of questions related to plants here. Are juniper plants very flammable? This is from Victoria Hall. My neighbor says they're fire bombs.
Second that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree on that juniper's not a great plant to have near the house or underneath a tree or something like that, anywhere where a fire ladder could occur. Generally, there's pretty decent data on what plants are very flammable, and juniper would be in that group.
Okay, so speaking of, I guess, getting rid of your fire bombs, I'm gonna plug PCWA's rebate program one more time. And could we just put that up on the screen quickly, so that way if folks want to go to our website about our, can just take it down there. There we go. Rebates are available for taking out your turf and installing water efficient plants, to install high efficiency irrigation, for a water sense timer. And we also have a pool cover rebate, brand new this year. And then let me see, let's go to one more question, and then I want to make sure we have the slides for the master gardeners and the fire and the Auburn Fire Department too. So, living in the county, do you recommend we burn the ground to clean it up around the house in the fall after the first rain?
I'll take that one. Probably not after the first rain. So there's a lot of variables on where you live. You'll need to confirm with the jurisdiction if they allow burning. But if you are in Placer County, it is usually allowed in the rainy season. So as we all know, some of our most destructive fires in this state come in the fall. And that can be, even after that first rain, it's still very dangerous time because the real fine fuels, even though they get wet, they're going to dry right back out again when the wind blows. So waiting until the burning ban has been lifted, which for us is typically around November to December. I mean, in California, who knows now when the rain's going to come, but we have to have significant amounts of rainfall before burning is safe. And there will be notices from CAL FIRE, from the city of Auburn, from Air Pollution District, letting residents know when it's safe to burn. And then you'll need to also get a permit and verify that it is still a burn day, because every day can vary on whether or not burning is allowed.
Okay. I think let's try to grab one more given the time, or two more. Let's see. We have a number of, this is from Ms. Pine. We have a number of old oak trees on our property, some of which have limbs growing above our roof, not touching the roof. Should we have all the limbs above our house cut back?
So in the city of Auburn, we recommend 10 feet of clearance around your structure, whether it's the roof or the chimney or anything above or adjacent to your residence or your structures. And there's several reasons behind that. One, it keeps the leaf litter down. So in the fall, we know the leaves all like to fall down and they can land on your house, and that collection of leaves is another ember trap. So it helps reduce should that leaf litter build up. Second, if the tree does catch fire, like we talked about, maintaining that separation between the fuel, which in this case is the tree, and your home increases your chances survival rate.
Okay, and then this one, thanks, Rob. This one is could be, I think, Greg or Kevin, or maybe even Jeff. This is related, I saw another one, related to our plant zone 9. Given that it's getting a little bit warmer around here, plants used that are in that zone are starting to struggle, even the red bud. Is it potentially changing to a zone 10? This sounds like a master gardener question, or a very good gardener question. Are we changing to a zone 10? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, and that's a very challenging question to answer, because I would say in the micro view, yes, we're seeing that some of these plants that can normally survive high temperatures are starting to struggle, especially with the lack of soil moisture. So I would say that things are changing, absolutely. Whether or not that change continues to go in one direction or zigzags around, I'm not sure. But I do know that for the Master Gardener program, we're getting questions now about growing avocados. And those were questions we never got before. So things are definitely changing, yeah.
Okay, and I've got one more. This is kind of a trick question from somebody. It looks like they might actually be from PCWA. Is it safer to have hardscape or artificial turf in your yard? This is a tricky one.
Well, again, it goes back to a balance of things, and of course, hardscape is not flammable. Artificial turf, theoretically, if an ember were to fall on it, and it probably would not ignite, so that's pretty safe. I would say lawn is frankly safer than artificial turf in some senses, because it has a moisture content to it that's beneficial to the yard. But yeah, having the artificial turf or the hardscape, again, is a good balance, and that's something that is really helpful in that 5 foot to 30 foot zone. So that's kind of what we talked about in the video, was having a balance between hardscape and low plant material, low growing plant material that creates that secondary buffer.
Okay, well, so we've got exactly 5 minutes, and I've got one more question, so this is perfect. So from Mrs. Jones, what kind of landscape is best suited to a front yard that contains a large 20-year-old magnolia tree that is currently surrounded by lawn and I'm looking for a landscape that would conserve water while providing enough water to the tree. And this is tricky because this happens a lot, unfortunately, with big trees in the middle of the lawn. One gets overwatered and the other gets underwatered. So this is a trick that we find at the agency that's difficult. So I'm going to punt this one.
Well, it's not to say that you can't change your lawn to a lower water use type of plant material. Of course, when you do that, you'll be applying drip irrigation to all of those plants, so you'll still have moisture in the soil. And then it's always a good idea, if you have a tree like a magnolia that requires extra water, to install a secondary irrigation system with tree bubblers on it. And just locating those tree bubblers equidistant around the trunk of the tree, maybe they're 10 feet away from the trunk or whatever you feel like the appropriate root zone is for that tree. Putting in tree bubblers on a separate system will allow you to deep water that tree. So you might water your new shrubs underneath the magnolia tree, let's say 2 to 3 times a week, but you could turn your bubbler system on for, depending on the flow rate of that bubbler, maybe run that for 15 minutes once a week or even once every 2 weeks. And that'll still allow you to keep a good deep water moisture content for those types of trees that do require a little bit of extra water. It's not to say that you can't, that you have to keep your lawn underneath them, for sure. That would be the same thing for redwoods. Redwoods, we have a ton of redwoods in our area, and it just kills me to see them all starting to die out because people are turning off their water or watering less. A tree like that, it's important to keep water on, but you can do it as sparingly and do it, like I said, once a week and really get a good deep watering for those.
All right, thanks, Jeff. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and also I wanted to thank the Master Gardeners of Placer County, and there's some information there about how to reach them. If you have questions about your plants, please give them a call. And also I wanted to thank the City of Auburn Fire Department, and glad Rob was here to join us today live. And then also I want to give, we don't have a slide, but give a special shout out to Jeff Ambrosia with Yamasaki Landscape Architecture and his team for helping us with the design for the fire station and donating some time to help get that installed. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to everybody. I don't see any more questions. Oh, other than thank you very much. That was informational. Yay. And again, we'll have all this up on our website, hopefully in the next day or two. Thanks so much for joining us.